Hey folks, I'm Katie, Conservation Lands Manager at Three Rivers Land Trust. Last week we posted a photo of a deer skull and jawbone and asked you all to guess the age of the deer. Some of you guys were spot on and got it right. Other folks may have been wondering how we identify how old a deer is based on the jawbone. This can be a fairly easy technique based on the tooth wear and replacement technique. One of the first things I do when somebody hands me a jawbone is I will count the number of teeth. A deer fawn will have less than 6 teeth, whereas a deer that is a year and a half or older will have 6 teeth. Now this can be a little difficult if you've not taken the time to study a jawbone, so a piece of advice that I would have would be to look very closely at the bottom where the tooth connects to the jawbone so you can clearly see where one tooth starts and where one tooth stops. So for example, on this deer jawbone, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teeth. That lets me know automatically that this deer is a fawn, versus if it had 6 teeth, then this would be a deer that was at least a year and a half or older. The next thing I do when I'm handed a jawbone after I figure out how many teeth the deer has is I will look at the 3rd premolar. So this is a deer that is a year and a half or older. We know that because it has 6 teeth. So the next thing I do is, again, I will look at this 3rd premolar. So starting from the front, 1, 2, 3, and I will look and count how many cusps this tooth has. So a cusp is each of these little mountain tops. If this deer was a year and a half, this 3rd premolar would have 3 cusps to it. However, as you can see, this jawbone only has 2 cusps. So we know this deer is at least 2.5 years old. If this cusp was to have 3 cusps, we would know that that deer is a year and a half old. So that's the quick and easy way to determine if you have a fawn or a year and a half or a deer that is a year and a half or older. So the next step in this process gets a little more tricky and is a little more subjective. And this is where we begin comparing the amount of dentine versus enamel on each tooth. So the dentine, if you look closely, is the dark spots within the tooth versus the enamel, which is the white part of the tooth. Alright. So we know this deer is over a year and a half, and we know it's not a fawn because it has 6 teeth. This 3rd premolar has a bicusp to it. So the next part in the process is to look and see how much dentine, and again that is this dark portion, in comparison to the enamel on the lingual side, which is the tongue side of the jawbone. If the amount of dentine, the dark spot, is double the width of the enamel, then we would say that this deer is at least 3.5 years old. If the amount of dentine was less than half of the amount of enamel, we would stay at 2.5 years old. However, since you can see the amount of dentine, or this dark spot, is more than half the width of that enamel, we would move to the next tooth and do the same thing. So we can see here that this dentine is double the width of the enamel, so we would say this deer is at least 4.5, and we would move to the next tooth. Again, we look to see if the dentine is double the width of the enamel, and we would say yes, that it was. So we would say this deer is at least 5.5, and we would move back to that 1st molar. So this gets a little bit more tricky and a little more subjective at this point, but what we're looking for now is to see if the infundibulum, or the inner portion of this tooth, has begun to get dished out, or if there's only a little island left. So I would definitely say that is the case with this, and that this would be a 6.5-year-old deer, because we would move to the next tooth and this tooth is not dished out, so we would stay at 6.5 years old. I hope this helps give you a little bit more information about how you can age a jawbone. Again, it can be a little tricky to somebody just starting out, but still I encourage you to find a jawbone and begin looking at it and familiarizing yourself with the teeth on the deer. This can be a great technique that you can use to help make informed deer management suggestions and or other management techniques. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we are happy to help.